My name's Glenn Scrivener, if we haven't met before. I'm from Canberra originally. I live in the UK at the moment, but I'm here in Sydney doing a few things for Newtown and Erskineville churches. I'm really looking forward to tonight because we've got Louisa May Hope. There you are. That's a brilliant name. I feel better even saying the name Louisa May Hope. I feel like you should have a column in a magazine or something, answering people's problems. Yes.
Things work out.
So, Louisa, I just said to you before we began that on Monday we arranged to meet up in a neutral venue, and I was thinking, well, you know, we need to get face to face and talk through Louisa's story before we come public on Wednesday. And so I just unthinkingly said, where should we meet? Somewhere neutral, a lovely safe space. How about a cafe? And you. You're very gracious, and you said, yeah, sure, cafe, that's fine. You're fine with cafes?
I'm fine with cafes.
Really?
Well, I'm an inner west chick, right? So you've got to be fine with cafes, haven't you?
Now, is Louisa's microphone working? Is that... No, it's not quite.
How's that?
Testing,
Any
testing.
better?
Ah, there we go.
Okay.
That sounds better. Yeah. So not only are you okay with cafes, you told me that actually you sometimes go back to the Lindt Cafe
Yeah,
itself.
certainly. You know, I go back there, well, for lots of reasons. I go back there because I have friends there now. You know, some people still work there, I know. And, of course, because it was a moment, and I'm into reclaiming the moment. And also, you know, lots of Sydney people and people from overseas and interstate and everywhere go to the Lindt Cafe now. And that's a great thing because, you know, it's kind of like that moment of, yeah, hanging on and claiming back.
Claiming it back. Yeah, that's interesting. That's you could almost translate claiming back as redeeming, couldn't you?
Yes,
It's that kind of going back to the same scene.
Yeah.
And amazing. So tonight we're going to be thinking about really a day of infamy in recent Australian history, a day where perhaps everyone in this room will remember where they were when they heard about the Lindt Cafe siege. And in a minute, we're actually going to look at a video that goes through some of the last minutes of that siege, and it's heavy. You've seen it only recently, is that right?
Well, actually, I saw it this evening when you sent it to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So even though you've got a starring role in terms of narrating it and talking us through it, but it is a very heavy 7-minute video, and tonight we are going to be talking about not glib things, heavy things. And if at any stage you need to get up and have a wander, take a breather, feel very free to do that. And if you need to talk some of these things through with people, process them with people, I'm around afterwards. Roger is around afterwards. Other ministers here at the church are around to help you and walk with you in this. But I thought one way of just setting the scene and putting us there on the 15th of December 2014 would be to watch this video. So shall we roll tape and have a look at the last minutes of the Lindt Cafe siege?
He's becoming more and more paranoid and concerned.
As we hit in front of that side door, the one that's open and debarricaded, he tells me to stop and wait there.
He took us to the window because he actually saw the reflection of police on the window of the opposite building. So he was pointing at the police, asking us, "Do you see that? Do you see that?"
I looked around, saw that there was pretty much most of the people in the room, and I just look around to everyone and say, "I'm going, let's go." And just open that door and run.
I think that's when everyone got up and ran. I remember just grabbing Harriet and just charging for that door.
Monis had let go of us instantly, and he just disappeared into the cafe, and he fired a shot.
I hear this crack, and there's just this like explosion of glass above the door that we've just run out of, and Joel and Harriet have just ducked beneath it, and I hear Joel just scream out, "He's chasing us."
I said he shot at us. I kept saying that, and I believe I said it to the police officer, he shot at us.
He could have bolted out that door, and no one would have blamed him to have left my mother and indeed even me behind. But he didn't do that. Tori was distressed. He was crying, and then he knelt. He indicated with his gun where he wanted Tori to kneel.
He was alive, and he deserved to have hope that someone was going to come in and save him.
And then he shot up into a window, up into the far right corner. Tori fell forward with a thud. And he still had his hands behind his head.
And then he composed himself and put himself up on his knees again into that same position.
I didn't know what was happening, but if the police weren't coming in now, then maybe I have to make my own way out. Then I thought I heard noise that sounded like reloading, and then I just made a run for it.
Mona stood behind him and shot him in his head.
He knew that he was going to die, and he died with such dignity.
I could see, figures, but by then it was smoke and dark and flashing lights.
That's when I said, oh my God, they've killed her. Just knew they'd killed her.
Is it possible for you to explain to me what you lost?
Everything that was meaningful in my life.
I can't believe you lived through that.
Yes, I have to say that there are days when I wonder myself how I lived through that. And, you know, that moment takes us right back into the cafe, into that moment. Many of you would have stayed up and watched the television and prayed and waited, yeah. And being in there, you know, doesn't show there on that vid, but at the inquest, the forensic evidence is quite astounding. You know, it's broken down into factual, actual things that happened. And yeah, well, all that was going on, I was standing and bullets and everything coming from either side. And honestly, and I say it even now, there's this gap, you see, there's a gap in my memory. Like, I remember all of that very vividly and precisely. And memory's a funny thing, it comes and goes, it changes, it actually does change your memory. But I have this gap, this missing gap of about 10 seconds where I do not know how I got from standing right next to Monis, police bullets coming in either side, and somehow I was standing and the next minute I was on the floor. And to this day I don't know how. And because it's very bizarre actually, and even the forensics talk about a moment in there that didn't seem right. They talk about a flashing light that they can't explain. That's a whole other story. But anyway, my own memory of it was standing, then being on the floor somehow. And mystified to this very day, how we didn't get killed, why we didn't get killed. It's astounding.
There's 22 shots were fired by the police coming in. 13 of them hit Monis. The others ricochet around.
Yes.
Your hit, obviously Katrina is hit.
Yeah.
Your mother is hit.
Yes.
Was there anyone not hit?
No, Marcia was also in the room.
Right.
Tory, of course, was deliberately murdered. He was assassinated by Monis. And, you know, I saw that happen, and I didn't think that he was going to actually do it, because he prepared himself like an athlete, like, shaking down his shoulders, moving the gun, shuffling, scanning, waiting for the police. He's waiting for the police to come in through the front door. He's scanning the windows, and he pops one shot up into the corner, and Tory flinched and went down, but he, got back up, and Monis didn't kill him that first time. And the second time he started to do this, roll his shoulders and adjust the gun, I thought, oh, he might do it. He didn't do it last time. And then bang, and he did it. It was just, and your mind goes like, oh no way, God, surely he just, maybe he hit his shoulder or something and he's gone, you try and imagine other things have happened. But of course, he'd shot Tory, and then we'd waited and just waited. We were waiting for the police to come. And sadly, that was not part of their plan that night. And so when it did happen, that the police come, it was quite dramatic and terrifying, really.
Yes, and you say you looked down at one stage and you saw that your sandal strap was broken or something.
Yeah.
That was the first that you noticed that you'd been shot.
It was just so intense, everything. Well, actually, it just went on and on and on, the shooting. And of course, it wasn't like it was 10 or 15 minutes of shooting. It was only a few minutes of shooting, but it felt like, that car accident moment when everything slows down but goes fast. It was just like that. And, I remember when I realised that I was on the floor and I had my hands were covering my eyes and it just kept going, the shooting and the smoke and the lights and everything, it kept going, and I thought, my goodness, we've made it through all of this day and here we are, we're going to die right now. And, that was, and I thought, well, I might as well watch, if this is my last minute. So I took my hands away, and I couldn't see much because there was so much smoke and lights and flashing and everything. And then I looked down at my foot, and I went, oh no, the straps of my sandals gone, you know, and my favourite sandals, right? And, you know, it's crazy, right? I already thought I was going to die in that moment, but at the same time I'm trying to work out how am I going to get my sandal fixed, and then the pain, like, I know, isn't that ridiculous? But what do you say? That's what was really going on. Your mind is in such a state of crazy. And then, of course, and then I felt the pain after that. It was like searing, piercing, like pain, like, you know. Yeah. I just, and of course I thought, well, I can't scream out because they're still shooting, so they mustn't have got him yet, you know. So I thought, I can't scream because then he'll know where I am, and I don't want him. So, you know, it was just insane.
Wow. Tell me how that day began. So 15th of December, 2014, you're meeting your mum there just for a hot chocolate or something?
Yeah, no, well, Mum and I just went into town. She had business with a lawyer in the same building as the Lind. And, you know, we lived out, Mum lived out at Penrith. So I was out with her, and we decided that night, I'd just come back from Texas, actually, in the States. And so we decided that night, the Sunday night, that we would go in and stay at the Hilton because we didn't want to get caught up in the morning traffic on the Monday. We wanted to be on time for our appointment, which was at 10 o'clock. So we went in and we're at the Hilton and we had that casual conversation. You know, you have a normal day, you know, you have your quiet time in the morning and just carry on and get up, get dressed.
Quiet times, a time with the Bible, kind of praying with...
Just,
yes.
Okay. Just well, you know, like that's what you do. So that's my habit, and I journal my prayers and all that sort of stuff, you know, how we do that. And so I had that normal time in the morning and was just, you're going to a lawyer, do some business for Mum. So I'm just like, well, God, whatever your will is for today, you know, just a normal day, a normal prayer. You know, I'm sure that whatever's going is going to be your will. I trust. Just normal trust day. So we go up and we have the conversation, Mum and I, will we stay at the Hilton for breakfast or will we go to the Lind? You know, which one, what do you want to do? All that kind of silly thing. And then, we'll just go up to the Lind. And then we were sitting there, had a little chat with Katrina and her group of people, and we had a little laugh and, you know, different things. We had coffee and toast, normal things, you know. And then we went, will we go upstairs yet? No, it's still too early. We'll just sit. We'll wait. We'll wait. Yeah. So, you know, like an ordinary day, making ordinary decisions, my mother and I, and then all of those decisions, one after the other, you know, if we had left, if we'd had breakfast at the Hilton, you know, all those what ifs, but... Do
you play that a lot, the what if game?
No, actually.
Try not to.
But I understand that people ask those questions, you know. Yeah. But I don't, you know, because it was the day, and it was the day that was, and it was a day that started like any other with whatever your will is today, God.
And what is the moment where you realise things are bad? Like, how does he reveal himself to the cafe?
Oh, well, that was, well, you know, there you go. We heard there was a buzz around the cafe about the doors not working, you know, the electric doors, glass doors, and I just went, oh, well, that's easy fix, you know, just call the building manager, that's not a problem. I'm like, what's the problem, you know? Someone should be able to manage that, you know? So anyway, I said to my mum, I'll just go and pay. So I go over and I pay, and the young girl I'm paying my money to, and she's absolutely in this gobsmacked state, not paying attention at all to do our transaction. I'm thinking, this little girl, she really, you know, should lift a game, you know, she's not paying attention. But of course she was paying attention to what was going on, and I was focused on paying, and she's focused in the room. And there he is, he's stood up and he's put on his bandana and he's pulling the gun out of, you know, he actually started to make like a little speech, like you're going to be held hostage. And, you know, seriously, I'm thinking, we're across the road from Channel 7.
Right.
It's candid camera, right? You know, no one, it's just crazy. It's just you can't fathom it in your mind that that's happening. So I'm making up excuses in my head. But of course, when he pulls out the gun, it's like, oh dear, that's real, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a bit wow. You know, this is like, it's not America, it's Australia.
And he'd sealed the doors?
Yes, the doors were locked, they weren't working.
Yeah. Okay. And there begins a 16-hour siege?
Yeah.
Okay.
Too weird.
Too weird. Who did you get to know during your time there?
Well, it was a very strange arrangement in the cafe because he was directing things, and of course part of the things that he was directing was he was not allowing, he gave us toilet breaks, you know, when you think about 16 hours, right? So he gave us toilet breaks, but we weren't allowed to go to the bathroom by ourselves. We had to be taken by some of the Lindt staff. So we got to know the Lindt staff quite well, really, because they were ferrying us back and forward to the bathroom. And of course, you know, sometimes you just went to the bathroom even if you did or you didn't want to go, you know, you just had to have that, get out of the situation there. So there was a lot of that coming. He was very, you know, was not worried about that, was letting us go toilet breaks and was giving us food and water and rotating people around, standing at the windows, etc. So even though we were complete strangers, we quickly kind of got to know each other. So strange that. But very much so, young Jared Morton Hoffman, who was the young boy with the dark hair and the white shirt in the video there, and an astounding young man, astounding, no other way to describe it. He received a Hero's Reward just recently for his what he did in the cafe. But yeah.
And what were your impressions of the gunman himself? I've heard him described as a deranged toddler, just sort of flying off into this and that tantrum, and then he could be quite changeable and play the nice guy at times.
Most definitely, and I think that this is an important thing, you know. This man, in my testimony, I described him as ordinary to the police, and he was ordinary. He was tall and quite solid, and he was dressed like my mum, you know, she notices. She said he was very clean. And he was very clean and very neat. Like his trousers were ironed and his shirt was pressed. The things you remember, right? But he was equally going to kill us and equally kind. He was equally, as the night went on, become more and more paranoid, but he was also, had his own logical sense. He was polite. He was interested. He became, actually, more and more interested in each of us as the day went on. So it didn't take us all very long to work out that what he really wanted was attention. He wanted attention from the Prime Minister, and that we were best served, as we waited for the police to come, to try and do everything to get him that attention. So there was a lot of smart people in that room, actually. You know, a lot of smart people who had very good ideas. Those young people who worked at Lindt, they're all at university studying. Of course, it was their summer job. There were people there who worked for banks, and they were lawyers and in the corporate, you know, world there and everything. And so, you know, people were very smart, and it didn't take long for us to all work out that the best thing to do was to agree with him that our government didn't care about us, and that, you know, Tony Abbott was, you know, this and that kind of Prime Minister, and so we're all just agreeing, yes, we agree. And so that we did that, we quickly got on board with that and tried our hardest to get him media attention.
Yes, because when you think through his motives, that you think is top of the list.
Yeah.
Just attention.
That's right. Well, see, when he didn't, you know, like it's a terrorist attack, right? So the first thing you assume is terrorists kill people straight away, usually. That's usually how it goes down. But this was not what's happening with us. We were being held hostage with the threat, and, you know, different times during the day, an increased threat. But, you know, the day kind of progressed in that way. The thing about him was, of course, and this is very important for us, I think, is that we do not forget this man's humanity. Because even though he did a despicable thing, and he intended to do that, and the coroner has found that he was a terrorist. In my thinking as the day was going by, I was thinking to myself, yeah, I know your type. I know your type. You're the type of man that tells your wife you love her and then smashes her around the head in the next second, you know? You know, that violent man that kind of is all nice and kind to you and then an absolute mongrel the next. And, you know, that kind of man is abroad in our society, in our culture, in our country, you know, in our families even, you know.
Yeah.
So
That's interesting because surely the psychological pull for you would be to simply demonize him, to simply say he's a different species. He's just a monster. But there's something in you that's saying, no, there's a spark of humanity in him.
Yes,
There's
that's
a
right.
commonality between him and me.
That's, well, you know, this is, I guess this is the reality of faith and everything, you know, that we are all equally good and we are all equally bad. Sure, you and I aren't going to go out and, you know, take hostages in a cafe and kill people. But, you know, the fact of the matter is we have to understand that not wanting to necessarily, you know, talk about religious things as such, but just that, you know, the cross, Jesus makes us all very equal, you know, we equally come to that same place. So this man in that cafe doing those really bad things, I could see aspects of his nature that were hopeful. And I didn't know it at the time, of course, but he had a season where he was trying to be hyper-spiritual in his, you know, he was trying to be a sheikh at different times and an Islamic teacher and all that kind of stuff. So somewhere inside of him, there was this little element that obviously wanted to be good, you know, or be religious or something like that. So, you know, there was something in him. But the other danger for us, of course, is the minute we say, I couldn't possibly be like him, or we can't possibly be like him, then we deny his humanity. And when we deny his humanity, we throw out the opportunity to get to understand him and his crime and his thinking. And once we do that, we've lost the opportunity to understand what happened and why it happened and how it happened. And we can't let that happen to ourselves.
Right.
Because, you know, like, this is not going to finish. It's a long way from finished.
Right, right.
You know, so we have to learn the lessons.
Yes, yeah. There's a theologian who grew up in the Balkans and was surrounded by terrorism all the time. His name's Miroslav Volf, and he says, we're always trying to exclude the enemy from the circle of humanity, and we're trying to exclude ourselves from the circle of sinners. And we need to do the opposite.
Yes.
Humanize the enemy and realize the darkness that's in our hearts as well.
That's right.
And with that reason of, okay, he is a man with motivations. And actually, if we're going to stop this from happening further, we need to treat him as a man with motivations, not as a monster from another planet. Yeah. That's
so true. You know, I firmly believe that, actually, that, you know, all of the effort and the money, which is really great, that's what governments and police do, all the things that they are doing to protect us, yes, those things are important. But they can't hold back the tide. You know, ultimately, we cannot assume that all of those protections will ultimately ever protect us. So we have to find another way to understand this issue and get through it together as humans. So I think we could, if we start with understanding what's really going on, it doesn't mean that we excuse it nor agree with it or anything like that. Not at all. But if we start to understand, then perhaps we will find a way to overcome.
So as people reflect back on the siege, it's very easy 3.5 years later, because now we know almost everything it's possible to know. There's been the inquest. So not only do we know everything from every perspective now, we also know how it ended. Which is something that nobody during the siege knew. Nobody knew how it was going to end. Nobody knew all the facts on the ground. But it's a very human response and very understandable and very necessary to have an inquest and to figure out what goes on. But do you feel that sometimes that can pass over into sort of a blame game that becomes unhealthy?
Yes.
How do you strike the balance between having an inquest and figuring out how we stop this in future, and it not passing over into the finger pointing?
Yeah. And well, you see, this is the thing. I know that when I got out of the cafe and they, so the the cops, right, the TAC team guys, that, you know, all the scary ones, they come in, they've done all their business and shot the whole place up, and then it's time for us to get out, and let's all get out quick, 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 because they thought there was a bomb, right? So they, very brave, those men, you know, they went in believing that there was a bomb, even though we'd figured out as hostages that there was no bomb. Anyway, so their urgency is to get us out as quickly as possible because they thought the bomb could still go off. They didn't know. So they say to me, get up, run, 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 you know, and I said, well, I can't, my foot. And so the cop says to me, you know, he's over the top of me and he's like, and he says, can you hop? And I'm like, yeah, sure, okay, I'll hop. So I get myself up, he hauls me up, and I start to try and hop out of the cafe. And then, of course, they scoop me up. You know, I'm a big woman, and so it took two of them, and they scoop me up, and they take me out of the cafe. They lie me on Phillip Street there on the corner. And my first thought was, well, I do not know how I survived. Thank God I survived. But my mother must be dead. There's no way anyone could have survived what happened there. So I started to shout out, does anyone know where my mother is? And I was convinced that Mum would be dead, and I was just still in that prayer state of sort of saying, well, God, I'm so grateful I'm still alive, but my mother must be dead. How do I work through this? But I knew that when I was there on Phillip Street that we had to somehow get something good out of what happened in that cafe, because I knew at that stage that Tori was dead, you know, wishful thinking that he wasn't, but I knew that, you know, he must have been dead. And I didn't know that Katrina was even in the room. But, you know, praying, and of course praying was happening all day for me, and obviously for many of you who are on the outside too. But just knowing that we had to get some good out of this, because I was petrified that we would have race riots in the street. You know, I went down to my first surgery thinking we're going to have, you know, it's going to explode. You know, tomorrow morning when we all woke up, it's going to be an explosion of hate, and, you know, all sorts of things could be happening in the street already. And of course, at the inquest, we discovered that the police were already gearing up for that very response. But what happened instead, of course, was that Sydney bought flowers, and it was just like a wave of relief.
There was the I'll ride with you hashtag came up and all that.
Made me so happy.
Yeah, so
such a relief.
Yeah, so some redemptive themes coming out of that. But at the same time, the hashtag coming out was pray for Sydney. And I remember being in England and praying for Sydney. And at the same time, as pray for Sydney comes up, there is a backlash with people saying, what, God? God's the problem here. He's not the solution. How do you, as a Christian woman, kind of process? You prayed in the morning, you said, your will be done, and as it turns out, that includes something like an armed siege and people dying. How do you put together a good God and the Sydney siege?
Yeah, you know, that is, that's a really valid and real question. And I think that there's no flary floss with that. There's no, and I think the thing is, for me really, is that we come at God with like a bargaining kind of, like a parental kind of bargaining sort of thing, you know, God, if I keep the rules, and if I do this, and if I do that, and if I'm good, and if I, you know, generally do what you want and do what you know, the Bible says and all that kind of stuff, then I'm going to be cool and I'm going to have this cruisy life. And that is the biggest misconception and misunderstanding. You know, there's scripture that says, just gone, lost it. All things work together for good for those who love God and who are called according to his purpose. And so we assume that all things working together for good are all things being happy, all things being easy. We equate good as this easy ride through life. But actually good, the good thing that is coming for us who love God is that we will be conformed or transformed or renewed or born again or revived into the Spirit of God and into the image of Jesus. And that's the good thing that's coming. And so if along the way, for me and in my life, I have to endure some things that are suffering, that are not easy, that rip away at my psyche, well, then so be it, you know. And so be it, because I want to. My heart's desire is to grow in God and to be that transformed person, to be that, you know, best version of myself. And because anything else is second best. So...
what did it mean during the siege? What did your faith mean to you during the siege?
Well, I think it kept me sane. So, you know, in the morning there was that kind of, oh, right, this is real. A gun. Yes, guns all over the city. Oh, my goodness. So that, and it instantly, you know, you go, whenever you experience something in life that challenges you, you know, you come to the crisis as the person that you are inside. Not the person you are in your head that you think you are, but the person that you really are in your gut, that true core person. And so you come to the crisis and that's the person that's tapped, you know, because you can't intellectualize or think your way out of, you know, something like 17 hours in the cafe. And, you know, life had given me a few little preparation steps along the way. So, you know, coming to the cafe, it was that moment of, well, if today's the day, the dying day, well then, okay, I'm ready for the dying day because I have faith, you know. And so then I was praying for the other people because I didn't know if they were ready for their dying day that could have happened that day. So I was praying for them. And then, of course, so prayer all through the day. And so this is what was happening inside of me during the day. And that was, whilst we're all busy with attention on Monis and what he wanted and how we could all help to get him that, I was starting to see myself in a different way and understand. I'd understood this intellectually, but I suddenly actually felt it. And that was, I felt the difference between my intellectual thinking, my emotional heart, and my core gut. So my core gut, which is faith and belief, well, that place, in that place, there was the peace of God that surpasses all understanding. Now that's a scripture, but it's amazing what comes to you when you're in a crisis, right? I couldn't give you chapter and verse, but I know the verses, you know, that come, you know, drop into your heart. And that was where I was in my gut. I was very peaceful because my peace was, if I died today, well, I die. If I live, oh well, I get another chance, right? So there was that. Emotionally, I was relatively steady, but aware that of everything around me and everyone, and also aware of people outside, and thinking through, you know, my family who didn't know that we were in there, and how they were going to be, and thinking about them. And then intellectually, as things in the cafe changed during the day, we are so not getting out of here.
Wow.
You know, like we're going to, you know, logically, sensibly, if you look at this, we're going to die.
Wow.
So juggling my inner dialogue.
Yeah.
But it was like a gift in a way to suddenly realise that about myself, how I think, you know, I think in 2 different ways, 3 different ways actually. And so now that I understand that about myself, it helps me in normal life to say, hang on, where am I? Am I feeling this in my gut? Is this a God moment? Or is this me just too busy in my head, you know? Yeah, so that's been a good thing.
But it sounds like a constant thing, like your
Yeah.
faith is informing you minute by minute.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. In a second, we're just going to open up to the floor. If you've got a burning question, we've probably only got time for 1 or 2. So if you do have a burning question, have a think, and we'll open it up in just a second. But as a Christian minister, sort of hearing you speak about this, I think 2 themes really come to the fore for me, and one is that very striking thing about the blame game and how very naturally even if we don't point our finger at, or we probably do point our finger at Monis, but then, you know, what about the police? What about the politicians? What about this? What about Islam? What about all these, you know, these big bogeymen, you know, out there? And I wonder whether a lot of that is part of our fear that we want to control life so much that it would help us if there are the bad bogeymen there and the good people here, and life was simple like that. And yet, sort of, as we're all pointing the finger and scapegoating people, you know, it's very interesting that in the Bible, Jesus comes down and kind of becomes the great scapegoat. It's like God, you know, comes down into the midst, and as we're all going, it's you, it's you, it's you, Jesus kind of comes and says, well, let it be me then.
Yeah.
Takes it on himself, rises up again, turns the other cheek, and sweeps us up into a peacemaking kind of a life. And that's totally different. So that's one thing that really occurs to me. And another thing that really occurs to me is this issue of suffering, and how does a good God and a suffering world fit together? And I think if it wasn't for the fact that Jesus has stepped down into this world to suffer with us, I think the Christians would have absolutely no answer to that. But I think if God has come to be with us, to be for us, to suffer God-forsaken agony with us, that's a different kind of proposition, the God who comes and joins us in the suffering.
Yes.
Does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, it absolutely so does. You know, there, like you said, there's lots of opportunity, especially in this particular circumstance. And, you know, I've heard it in the press and from other people, and, you know, well, it's Monis's, obviously it was definitely Monis's fault. He made choices, and he made bad choices. That particular human did bad things. You know, and yes, there's lots of blame for the police from the point of view of they weren't quite prepared. So there were definitely things there that needed to be fixed. The inquest told us that. You know, and then of course, is it Islam's fault? And if you are of Muslim faith, you say, no, that's not what Islam is. Well, you know, I have Muslim friends. I live with Muslim people. I live in the hood, you know, out there at Arncliffe. And so I know that the way they live their lives is not like this nutter.
Right.
And I hate using that word. It's one of those words. But not like this human in this insanity moment. And so, you know, I believe them when they say that that's not us. So, you know, the thing is, of course, is that we are all looking to plug the hole of fear. And the fear hole is, well, that it could happen to me, or that I could be like that, you know. And we're not we're not those people. That's not us. So we're okay. But, you know, teasing out our humanity requires a bit more thinking and feeling than that, really.
Yeah, very good. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to shoot our way? I can see one hand at the back there. Listen. How was Tory Johnson in managing the situation in the cafe? Because you got to know him a little bit, didn't you?
Yeah, well, Tory, this is what happened with him. He was the man in charge, and he was the first one that Monis dealt with. And he was making the original phone call to 000. As the day went on, it became very obvious that my mother was agitated, and she was angry. So this is about Tory. And my mother was very agitated, and she was, you know how we all know our mother's angry voice, right? Yeah, okay. And so I'm in the cafe, and originally I was sitting opposite Mum, and Mum was very smart. You know, she kept commenting about Monis. She could see him. Her back was to the Martin Place side, and my back was into the cafe. And she kept commenting about him. She kept saying, there's something funny about that man. Why is he there? What's he got? And I'm going, Mum, don't worry. You know, Mum, don't worry. And she kept coming back. And then, Mum, don't worry, you know. And she just kept coming back to him. Anyway, then it all happened. And she kind of gave me that look that said, I told you so, right? Yeah, and I'm going, oh. So anyway, we had that little moment, Mum and I. And then as the morning went on, I could see her getting angrier and angrier. And honestly, I was thinking, my goodness, Mum could get us killed. And it sounds a bit melodramatic, but she could. So this particular moment come, and she stands up and she says, I want to go to the bathroom, hands on her hips. I'm thinking, oh no, what's coming? And she says, and my daughter needs her medication, because I have MS, so I had some painkiller stuff going on. And so, you know, she barked at him, you know, and she did this 2 or 3 times. She back chatted at him. She, you know, and I'm thinking, any minute she's going to go, she's going to hit him, right? And anyway, she went to the bathroom. Jared and Fiona took her to the bathroom, and she hatched a plan. She said, I'm going to come up out of the bathroom, and I'm going to go right up to him, and I'm going to spit in his face. I'm so glad I didn't hear that. Anyway, and young Jared, amazing young man, 19, he says, no, Robin, he'll kill you if you do that. And Jared tells the story, and he says that's what he said to Mum. And Mum says, I don't care.
Wow.
I'm 78, or 72 she was at the time. I'm 72, doesn't matter what's going to happen to me. I'll go to heaven, blah, blah, because she's a woman of faith too. And she's like, that's what I'm going to do. And he's like, no, don't do that. And no, definitely this is what I'm going to do. And then he says, yes, but he might kill someone else. And then that's when she backed down. But she did come out of that bathroom and backchat him again. And he says to me, Louisa, control your mother. And I'm thinking, oh no. Like, I can do that, right? Mum.
On top of everything else,
Yeah,
it's a family crisis.
And I'm giving Mum daggers, and I'm saying, Mum. And she's looking at me, and I'm looking, and you're an old lady. Be quiet. And I'm thinking, when I get home, I'm in so much trouble. But anyway, but of course, so that was my mum's experience during that day. And I tell that story because Tory Johnson, he was the manager of the cafe. And what he did was he went to the bathroom and he come back and he positioned himself sitting right next to Mum. And they held hands all day. They were sitting I was sitting in a chair in the front and they were sitting on the bench seat behind a table. And I could hear them, little whispers and little laughing. And I could see that he was holding her hand, and he did that all day. And then at the end, as it said in that video, Tory could have got out. He could have got out all day. He knew how the fire doors worked. He knew what to do and where to go. He could have, like some of the other hostages did, he could have escaped. But Tory Johnson chose to stay. Now, at the end of the siege, for the life of me, I couldn't work out why he stayed. I could not understand why, when I went to run, he didn't run too and take my mother with him, but he didn't. 12 months later, after the first anniversary, Mum and I were having a quiet moment, and I said to her, Mum, when I got up to run, why didn't you and Tory leave? And Mum said to me, oh, I said to Tory, and she's going like this with her elbow, she's saying, Tory, you go, you leave. I couldn't see any of this because it was dark and it was too far away. And she said, but he said to me, no, I'll stay. So Tory Johnson made a deliberate decision to stay in that cafe and be with my mother. He didn't have to do that. I mean, if that's not sacrificial love, I don't know what is, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And he died because he made that sacrificial choice. So when you see young Thomas Zinn, his partner of 14 odd years, say that he lost everything that was meaningful that day, Tory was quite an amazing young man. And yes, I hope that answers your question. Long story, sorry.
I don't think you could give a better answer to that question in terms of speaking to his character. That's amazing. Perhaps time for one more question. Is there anyone else?
Hard to see.
Well, let me ask you just a couple of final questions before we draw a line under things. So, if there are people here and they think to themselves, my goodness, to have poise under fire, to have something to lean on when life gets that difficult would be amazing. What advice would you give to someone who might want to investigate Christian faith for themselves?
Yeah, well, I think that I just live in this blissed out state of gratitude, really, which sounds a bit airy-fairy, but that's the reality of my life. And, gratitude because of the fact that God could be bothered with me, that Jesus was there for me. And, you know, in the siege and post-siege, you see, more than anything, in the moment, the depth of comfort that I had, that if I died, it's cool, you know? Like, I know where I'm going to be with God. I'm going to be with Jesus, the lover of my soul, you know, that is a reality for me. It's not a religious thing. It's a deep core thing that is faith and hope and gratitude and love and all of those things that we grasp for in our lives. They are real live things in the fabric of my being that don't go. You know, they're knit inside me now, as they are for other Christian people too. And so if you've hedged with God, I'd say, well, give up with the hedging and just get there, you know, because you don't know your day. You do not know your day. We live in the collective delusion that we are under control, and it's hilarious. You know, yeah, but we do. We wake up every day thinking, oh, I've got this, and this is my plan, and this is how it's going to work out, and ha, ha, ha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were never in control.
No,
Yeah.
no, the collective myth, you know. But that's all about, you know, comfort and control, and we live in the world like that, and, you know, we make plans, this and that, and we do that thing, but here we are. You don't know your day.
Yeah, yeah. So that very, very simple story that Jesus tells of the wise man built his house on the rock, the foolish man builds his house on the sand when the rain comes.
Yeah.
That interesting word, when.
Yes, exactly.
The rain is coming, so take the opportunity to find what's solid.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, well, you know, because it hasn't been, like, I don't live a religious life. I live a life that's based on faith and relationship. You know, my relationship with God is as deep and as real as my relationship with my friends and family and all of that. And I understand, you know, I used to be an atheist. I totally get how whacked out and weird that sounds. But hey, you know, when you come through that, when you let your gut enliven your heart and inform your mind, it's a different way of being, and it is life-giving. Yeah.
Great word to finish on, Louisa. And you're going to be around a little bit if someone wants to say hello, and certainly I'll be around a little bit. And Roger as well, the minister here, he's going to come up and bring our meeting to a close and let us all know some ways that we can take things forward. But before he comes up, let's give a massive round of applause for Louisa Hope.